freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Hey everybody, Cheryl Todd here from Gun Freedom Radio, and I am here with my good friend and fellow DC Project delegate, Kim Petters. Now, Kim is a retired U.S. Air Force Staff Sergeant and a veteran advocate in the state of Delaware. Kim's career in political advocacy began when she successfully led a campaign to increase medical marijuana access to those diagnosed with PTSD. And since then, Kim remains a key player involved in several other bills introduced in the Delaware legislature to include a bill to restore Second Amendment rights to medical marijuana patients, which so far has passed the Senate floor unanimously in Delaware, which is super heavy Democrat. Welcome to the show, Kim Petters.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on to talk about all of this.
Absolutely. I mean, right there, I think people have just kind of like paused, like, wait, what now? First of all, we're talking about marijuana. We're talking about marijuana and guns. We're talking about getting things passed unanimously in a heavy Democratic state that has to do with the Second Amendment and marijuana. Like, people's heads are exploding right now. So we'll let them kind of absorb that information and just kind of start with, how did a nice girl like you end up being a passionate supporter and a passionate advocate for something like cannabis?
It's funny you asked that, because if you would have asked me 5 years ago if I'd ever be doing this, I would have said, no way, not a chance, absolutely not. And so, well, you know, while I was in the military, while I was deployed, one of the jobs I had, and unfortunately it's something that needs to be done, was the human remain missions for all of our fallen U.S. coming back. And so I took that home with me. I did. I had PTSD. And so I got retired out of the military with PTSD. And, you know, I was one of those veterans taking the typical PTSD cocktail. I was taking something for anti-anxiety medication, antidepressant, something to help me sleep, you know, the usual rundown. And, you know, a few years of doing this, it started to take a toll on me. And I just thought, you know, these medications really aren't helping anyways. And I did some research on the computer, and I found veterans were having success using cannabis, using marijuana. And I thought, no way, not a chance. I mean, I was just such a conservative mother, and just no way. Yeah, but I was desperate. And I mean, if you really heard the testimony from these veterans, and I thought, okay, I'm going to try it. And so I asked my brother-in-law, the only person I knew that could help me out. And I tried it, and it worked instantly. Instantly, I felt better. Instantly, I was laughing. And on one hand, that's great. But on the other hand, in my eyes, these are drugs. I am doing something terrible. And what do I do? But, you know, but I felt better. So I kept going with it privately. Nobody knew. I was hiding in a corner of my bathroom upstairs. And before I knew it, I realized, oh my gosh, I have not taken anything for anxiety in quite a while. Wow, when is the last time I needed that sleep medication? You know, and the last thing I came off of within, I'd say maybe 6 to 8 months, was the depression medication. I no longer needed any medications. I felt great. The medications were no longer taking a toll on my body. And I thought, Delaware's got a program for this. They have a medical marijuana program for PTSD, and I'm going to make an honest woman out of myself, and I am going to get a card, because I never had been arrested before, and I feel like I'm, living this scary life, smoking weed as medicine, but what do I do? It's working, and I feel better. And because I felt better and because it was working, I knew that I needed every other veteran in my state to have access also. And yeah. And so I went to go get myself a card, but I saw how difficult it was. It required it was the only diagnosis to get access for medical marijuana that needed a specialist. It needed a psychiatrist's signature. Well, most veterans, we don't see psychiatrists, we see regular doctors. And Delaware is actually lacking in psychiatrists. And so I saw how hard it was to gain access. And I said, you know what? Cannabis is helping so much. All veterans need access. I'm willing to put myself out there. I am willing to tell the world I have PTSD. I am using cannabis. It's saving my life, and it can save a lot of other veterans too. And so I had no idea where to begin, and I Googled marijuana in Delaware, and I found a group that was setting out to change laws. And while I was there, I met a man named Rich Jester who said, I know how to write bills. I would write one and show you how to work with legislators, but you're going to have to push it forward. It's going to take a veteran. And long story short, I created a team of vets, and we pushed it forward, and it passed. And it's been amazing. I mean, PTSD is the number one reason people in Delaware are getting access to cannabis. We have once a year free programs for veterans to get cards because it is pricey. It costs $200. And, and someone would wonder, well, why would you want cannabis instead of regular prescription medication? And I'll tell you the reason is because those prescription medications are deadly.
Yes.
Because they're addictive.
Yes.
Veterans seen at the VA, as it stands right now, double the national average, just an accidental overdose from taking prescribed medications, double the national average. My generation of veterans, the Iraq and Afghanistan, OEF, OIF veterans, we face we're the generation of vets that face the opiate crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'll explain how that happened. So when the Vietnam veterans returned from war, a lot of them, PTSD wasn't really recognized back then. And so a lot of them self-medicated with alcohol. And as many as 3/4 of veterans, Vietnam veterans are documented as abusing alcohol. And whereas with my generation of veterans, when we first came back from the wars, when the war in 2001, when the wars were really ramping up, and veterans were coming back with a slew of problems, both mental and war-related injuries, it was then that within the VA, opiate prescriptions rose by 274%.
Whoa!
So we're throwing opiates and pills at these veterans. Well, let's look at a few more statistics. 70% of veterans who commit suicide seen at the VA have benzos in their system. These are medications that come with a side effect of suicidal ideation, whereas cannabis, that does not happen. Cannabis is non-addictive, and cannabis, I think almost most importantly, is impossible to overdose from. No matter how much cannabis you consume, you are never going to have to worry about a, medical emergency. So not only is it the safer alternative, but it's also the most effective for many veterans, including myself.
Absolutely. So
with choosing, go ahead.
So this is just such a fascinating journey that you've been on. So you come home from combat, right? You've done one of the, I just can't even imagine what a difficult job. One of the most difficult jobs is to reclaim the bodies, right, of those that have been killed in battle, like going to the battlefield and reclaiming those bodies.
Well, you have to say, I personally was not in combat. They came to me. But every single one in the entire AOR came through me.
Through you. And so, you know, those who do jobs that, you know, on our behalf, the scars, whether they're scars you can see or whether there's those internal scars, it is our duty and our obligation to be sure that we are doing everything that we can to give you the care and the help that you need. And what a story it is to say that not only did you have to come out of the closet to say, I have PTSD, because that's a risk right there, right?
It's a stigma is so real.
Right? And then you have to come out of this other closet saying, look, I found a way to treat my PTSD, but it's a dirty little secret. And I have to act like a guilty little teenager as a full-grown adult who knows what's best for myself, because there has been this huge stigma and bias against cannabis, marijuana. And I personally had to overcome my own bigotry towards marijuana. I've not ever used it. I don't have like a medical reason to use it. But, you know, I grew up when it was like, well, the stoners in high school, you know, they were the ones that, and I was, you know, just like little Miss Goody Two Shoes, and, you know, would never do such a thing. I'm sure, like you're saying about yourself.
Yeah.
How do I rectify in my mind that I am this person and now I'm breaking these laws and I'm being all secretive? And so those are two humongous closets that you had to come out of. Yeah. But I absolutely love that you set yourself into motion and you said, well, if I'm struggling with this, I know there's hundreds, thousands, maybe more people who are dealing with this, and I am going to reach out. You found Rick Jester, you reached out to the legislature, and you started getting things changed. And I don't love anything as much as I love a story of what one can do. So I am just really, I have so much respect for you, and I'm just in awe of who you are and what you have accomplished. So, you know, we've talked about kind of some of the reason why somebody would choose cannabis. I think it makes perfect sense. It's something natural that grows up out of the ground. It doesn't have, 12 pages of side effects, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
But yet there's still people out there that want to try to terrify us about the evils of weed, the evils of marijuana.
Yeah.
And I just think that they're probably in that bigoted mode that I used to be in. And you're one of the big reasons, hearing your story personally, firsthand, sitting and asking you questions, and you being so open and welcome to hearing me ask the questions and letting me just expose my ignorance. It helped move me to a new place where I can see, well, this is kind of a duh. This is kind of like a what? Why would we not be doing this? And so here's a piece of the story that a lot of people don't know. Those who use medical marijuana, right? They have a choice to make. And that choice is, you can get healthy with this natural medicine, or you can exercise your Second Amendment rights to keep and bear arms. Now talk to us about that. How do those two things even come into play together?
Right. So state laws and federal laws conflict with each other.
Okay.
Even if, so myself as an example, I follow doctor's orders and I follow state laws as far as the medical marijuana program goes. However, according to the federal government, cannabis is still looked at as illegal. So according to the federal government, I am still technically an unlawful user, regardless of state laws, whether it be recreational or medicinal. So for a person like me, if I want to, which I do want to, go into a gun shop and I would like to purchase a firearm. I've never been arrested. I've served my country and I'm a law-abiding citizen. I would get denied that sale or purchase. And the reason is because on the NICS form, which is the federal background check, as you know, that when required with any purchase, with any sale of firearms, it specifically asks on question 11E, are you an unlawful user of marijuana, regardless of the laws in your state? And technically, according to the federal law, the federal government, I am an unlawful user. So I would have to check yes, which means I would be denied sale. Now, if I were to lie and check no, that could land me as much as 5 years in jail.
Exactly.
So basically, if someone like myself, who chose medical marijuana instead of the pills for health reasons, because it's safer and more effective, I also have to choose, if you want medical marijuana, you have to give up your right to bear arms, which is so unconstitutional. I don't even know where to begin, because here's the thing. If I wanted to stay on opiates, if I wanted to stay on benzos, if I wanted to stay on all those other medications, I could keep my Second Amendment rights. And see, two things about this bother me. One, because I lose my rights, the ones that I fought for, but also there's other veterans and other people with PTSD who won't get help because they're afraid to lose their rights.
Right.
Either that, or they are, or they're in a position where they're breaking the law, or some people will stick to, instead of getting a safe medicinal product from a dispensary, now they're buying on the street, which can have mold, pesticides, mildew, all sorts of different things. They no longer have a safe product. And it's just not right to put anyone in that position. Nobody. Yet you can drink as much alcohol as you want and still be able to purchase a firearm. You just can't have cannabis. Now, something else, one of my favorite legislators here in Delaware said this. He said, you know, Kim, it's interesting because some of the products that they sell in the dispensary are topical. And it does have THC and CBD, but you don't ingest it. You don't get the psychoactive effect from it. You don't get high, so to speak. However, because you have that medical marijuana card, you still lose your right to bear arms. And this legislator said that's about as makes about as much sense as, you know, losing your license for using rubbing alcohol, you know, or, you know, it just makes no sense. And it's putting people in this position all over the country. And honestly, quite frankly, 25 million Americans use cannabis, have reported smoking weed or vaping weed or eating it, consuming it, however you want. 25 million Americans are either breaking the law or losing their Second Amendment rights.
Right. And that's the ones that reported. And we all know that, you know, there's a lot of people, especially when you're in that situation, you're not going to tell anybody anything. You're going to stay in that upstairs bedroom like a guilty, you know, having your guilty secret like a teenager. And, you know, I think that we're at such an interesting moment in time for you and I to be, to have met and to be having these conversations, because just yesterday, I saw two news stories that relate to this. One is, you know, that way overproducing and over-medicating, over-prescribing of the opioids. Johnson & Johnson were just, a judgment was just levied against them in a lawsuit to have to pay, what was it, $500 million back? And that's in one state. So that's happening at the exact same time as this other report that I think it was the DES, they are asking for a research study on cannabis. So that sounds like they're opening the doors and paving the ways to move it out of that category where it is like oh, you use weed, well, you know, you're a hippie, or there's something wrong with you, or you're an undesirable in some way, to be able to see. And personally, I get frustrated because it's like, oh, if they can make money off of it, okay, then great. But if it's, you know, something that you could grow in your own backyard or on your windowsill or however that's done, well, now that's just frowned upon. And, you know, we've got legal.
But you can brew as much beer as you want, and you can grow your own tobacco, and those are two lethal substances. I know. And you know, it really is unfortunate, and I don't want to get too much into the cannabis realm because I know you want to keep it firearms related, but I do have to say something else that a lot of people aren't aware of when it comes to marijuana laws. States that have legalized with recreational programs have seen as much as a 25% reduction in opiate overdoses, because that substitution effect is so real. And then states that have really good medical programs have seen as much as a 10% decrease in opiate prescriptions going out.
See, it's powerful. This is, I mean, this can change lives. This is saving lives. I have to believe that. And so this whole idea of PTSD, you know, people have this idea in their mind that those with PTSD, maybe they need these really heavy narcotics because they're just, you know, a loose cannon waiting to just go off somewhere in public. Somehow I look at you and I know you and I've talked to you and hundreds of other people that do have PTSD, and that wouldn't describe a single one of them. What can you do to help people better understand, you know, what we're really talking about when you're talking about PTS?
So one thing to understand with PTS, it is not like what you see in the movies. A veteran is not going to hear a loud noise and all of a sudden hit the deck and start freaking out and become violent. That doesn't happen. We have hundreds of thousands of veterans in the United States with PTSD, PTS. And it's a bad habit. See, we got rid of the disorder, and I need to get better at that too, with PTS. If we had a problem with veterans becoming violent in America with PTS, you would know about it. We are talking about people who are trained. In the military, there's this saying, and I will not say the cuss word, but I will bleep over it. We are trained to kill and blow up their, okay? Two things.
Their poop.
We're trained to do.
Blow up their poop, right?
Yeah, the bad guys. We're trained to go over there and you know, but do you see people coming back? Do you see veterans coming back, freaking out and doing these crazy things? Do you see them shooting up places or creating bombs and putting them in buildings? Like, you do not see this. They're not loose cannon. More often than not, veterans who are struggling with PTSD are isolating. They want to be by themselves. They're struggling with depression and anxiety, and they're having awful nightmares. But it doesn't mean they're a harm to themselves or other people. Yes, suicide is a factor when it comes to PTSD, but it doesn't even mean that someone with PTSD is going to be suicidal. And, you know, I was really thinking about this, and we all know that PTSD does not just come from combat or come from war, right? What about people who who heard the words, "you have cancer," and had to fight for their lives? What about someone who, God forbid, no one wants to go through this, but maybe lost their child? Yes. What about someone who was an assault victim? Yes. Should all of these people be treated as crazy because they're experiencing symptoms of trauma? Not at all. The stigma is so unfortunately real and alive in America, and it's going to take people sticking up for each other and saying, hey, no, actually, when you hear someone saying, oh, that neighbor's got PTSD, you better be careful of them. No, actually, I talk to them all the time. They're great. You know, they're fine. You know, they're the same people you see outside mowing their lawn and gardening and playing with their kids and going for a jog, and they're not, PTSD does not mean that they're going to harm anybody or that they should have their guns taken away from them.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. There really is such a misunderstanding about what trauma is and how people handle it and deal with it. I think it's so much like grief. You know, we may never get fully over, get over the loss of your child. You're never going to do that, right? But you handle it, you deal with it one day at a time. You're going to have good days. You're going to have bad days. But that trauma is part of you, but you shouldn't be shunned. You shouldn't be labeled. You shouldn't be kind of set off to the side like you're made of glass and you're going to break at the slightest provocation. So I really appreciate you bringing that up and talking about it the way that you have. Something right now that's just so top of my mind all the time is the threat of these new red flag gun laws. And so somebody comes out of that closet and says, I do have PTSD and I want to seek help. Well, they're risking that somebody's going to flag them with a red flag gun law. Somebody says, I use this kind of medication to treat a trauma. Okay, you're not in control of yourself, someone could say, and they could hit you with a red flag gun law. And exactly as you said, my husband Danny and I were having this conversation the other day that, you know, when people want like this universal background check, which is a complete mythical creature to begin with, and even if it could be made a decent system, then it's only as good as the information. So what if somebody gets a diagnosis? You know, yesterday they didn't have a diagnosis. Today they do have a diagnosis of stage 4 cancer. They are going to be in a different mindset than they were. It doesn't mean they're going to be a harm to self or others, but and I don't know how HIPAA laws would work with this, but is the physician now supposed to report that to somebody? Right? Because this person is going to be in a different mindset.
So I actually have been doing as much research as I can in the past week, and I've spoken to as many veterans as I can, and I have not gotten a clear answer for this one specific issue. So I know that veterans who are seen at the VA, if they are deemed incompetent or unable to take care of their own finances, whether for mental or physical reasons, the VA then starts a file on them that they send to the FBI, and the FBI inputs that information into the NICS system, which will deny them right to purchase a firearm, right? And so I did see that a bill came out, HR 1181, I believe it is. It came out, yes, HR 1181. Which what that would do is it made it so that, and it came out in 2017, made it so that those people are not reported. Those veterans are not reported to the FBI. It passed the House, but it looks like it stalled out from there, right? And so I needed more answers. And so I called some of the most knowledgeable veterans I know and said, hey, what is the deal? And they said, you know, Kim, all of them either had a different answer or weren't too sure. And you know what every single one of them said? Well, you know, this is the exact reason why we don't let the VA know exactly what's going on anyways, because we're never really sure when they're going to take our guns away. And no veteran wants that to happen. Even veterans who do not own guns still don't want their right to bear arms taken away from them, because it's a kick in the face. It's a kick in the teeth. It's, you know, you were good enough to handle all this weaponry overseas, but now that you're back home, nope, sorry, you can't. We're going to deem you incompetent because you're unable to take care of your own finances. And because you can't take care of your own finances, we're going to strip your right to bear arms. That right there is a deterrent for veterans to get help. They don't want to go to the VA and get rated incompetent. They don't want to get cannabis and have their rights taken away from them. You know, and it's like, these are the people who are trained by the DOD. The Department of Defense has trained these people. These men and women who have fought for our country, who come back and they live in fear of having their Second Amendment rights taken from them. And that is not okay.
That is absolutely not okay. I have a friend who was texting me a month or so ago, showing me, taking pictures of the letter that this person had received, stating that. And I explained that it was something that started under the Obama administration, but it was, yes. I thought that it had been squelched. But there are certain things that, like, once it's part of a culture, and if it's part of the culture of the VA to do this, then it's just there. that they're going to continue to speak in this way and report in this way. But it could be, like you said, that it went through the House and then didn't get through the Senate or something like that. But
it looks like it stalled out. I'm not 100%, but it does look like it stalled.
This is something that has to be fixed. Now, I have another question that I want to come back to. But since we're talking about the legislature, we do have a few federal and state legislators that they get how crazy and backwards and upside down and ludicrous all of this is. Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massie is one, and in your state, Delaware, State Senator Anthony Del Colo is another. Tell us what they're doing how are they interacting with the current laws, and how are they trying to change them?
Okay, so Senator Anthony Del Colo in Delaware, he's at the state level. He sponsored and championed a bill, SB 79, which would restore firearms rights to medical marijuana patients. And most recently, it went through the Senate, and it passed unanimously. Every single senator voted yes, because when you want to talk common sense, this is common sense. There is no other medication in the world where you lose your Second Amendment rights. Why would cannabis be one of them? And but unfortunately, our session is done for the year. So when the House comes back in January, I'm hoping it will also pass unanimously. And so far, from all the legislators I've spoken to, it looks like it's going to. So, and unfortunately, so that's good and bad. So it's good on one hand because, it's a state level bill, can't change anything federally, but it does, one, it sends a message to the federal government.
Absolutely.
And two, it makes it so that if someone is pulled over and they do have their firearm that they did buy and then later became a medical marijuana patient and they have both at the same time, both cannabis and firearms, they're not going to get charged. They're not going to get arrested. Now, does that help someone like me, this bill, go in and purchase a firearm? No, unfortunately it doesn't. Because again, it needs to be changed at the federal level, which is where Congressman Massie and Congressman Mooney come in. They actually have a bill at the federal level, which also seeks to restore Second Amendment rights to patients. However, I'm going to be honest with you, Cheryl, that bill is not going to go anywhere because the chair of the committee it's assigned to is Congressman Nadler. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. And it doesn't look like he's going to let that bill move anywhere.
It's Nadler, and
Nadler, yeah.
Not terribly surprised. Man, that is, and go ahead.
It is a little frustrating of Congressman Nadler because he supports people's rights to access to cannabis and he supports legalization. However, he doesn't support those same people getting their Second Amendment rights back, and rights that should have never been taken from them, and I don't understand it.
Yeah. No,
it makes no sense to me.
It doesn't make any sense, and it is frustrating. But every time there's a win, like getting a unanimous vote in the Senate in Delaware, that's huge. That's powerful to help encourage other states, other Kim Petters in the state of Arizona, Kim Petters in the state of Kentucky that has Thomas Massie as their congressperson. Let's start where there can possibly be some wins, and hopefully it'll just be like a snowball effect that people will run out of nonsense reasons and excuses to not support it. Because I do think that there is just so much there's knee-jerk bigotry either towards marijuana, knee-jerk bigotry towards people who own guns, and sometimes towards both things. So we just chip away, right? Right. And I do think when it comes to those who are typically against firearms and those who want heavy control, gun control, at least in my state Senate, the ones who did vote yes to this, it's because they do realize
it is discrimination to have cannabis be the only medication. I mean, we're talking about someone who maybe is going through cancer and they have cancer and they're going through chemotherapy and they want cannabis to help them get through that phase in life. At a time when they're weak and most vulnerable, is that really when we should be taking away their right to bear arms? Absolutely. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense. Yet if they wanted to stay on the opiates and the Oxycontin through chemo, they could keep their guns. How does that make any sense?
It makes no sense.
It just doesn't.
So I think we've kind of answered this question just through the various ways that we've been discussing what cannabis is and what PTSD is and is not. But for those who are out there still struggling with the idea that, well, we can't have somebody all like, high, I guess is the right word.
Yeah.
High and owning guns. Like, how can they keep and bear arms and also have the ability to be high? And if it's the PTSD that's causing them. So should we take guns from people who have PTSD?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Here's the thing. The only argument that anybody could even possibly stand on is, well, what if they're a suicide risk? However, even then, I don't think that's a reason to take someone's guns. I think that's a reason to make sure that person is under 24-hour surveillance and make sure that that person is safe. Because where there's a will, there's a way. And if a person is suicidal, the person needs to be watched, not have their guns taken away from them. Are you going to take away their pills too? Are you going to take away all the cleaning chemicals? Are you going to make sure there's no ropes, strings? You know, they can't have their car. Maybe they want to go out and crash their car. Do you take their car away from them? You know, it just doesn't make sense. It's not the object that's a threat to the person. It's the person that could possibly be a threat to the person. And so when it comes to PTSD, you know, this knee-jerk reaction to take guns isn't a good one, because all that does is hinder people from getting help.
Exactly. Exactly.
It has unintended consequences. It truly does.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said that better myself. So as I mentioned at the top of, as we start winding down here, at the top of the interview, you are a fellow DC Project delegate. I'm from Arizona. You're from Delaware. This was your first year going on our DC Project trip.
Amazing experience.
Oh, well, and
Amazing.
You made it amazing because I was lucky enough. We travel in teams, usually 3-4 ladies to a team, and you were on my team. And just being able to listen and watch how you interacted with the legislatures, because those that aren't aware of what the DC Project is it's 50 women, one from each state. We meet once a year in our nation's capital. We break into teams. We go and sit down with our individual legislators, but like, you know, we go into the Delaware office. I'm Arizona. I go in with Kim, and we get to interact in a real way. We get to have true conversations to help our legislators understand where we're coming from. You know, why we value the Second Amendment, because we don't look like the stereotype of the average gun owner, you know, that's supposed to be 50 and over bearded camel wearing guys, right? And so, you know, our lane is the Second Amendment, but then we each have a lane within a lane, and yours was the cannabis issue. And that was so powerful. You talked for a minute about that. What was that like for you as you watched people on both sides of the debate kind of have aha moments as you spoke?
I think realizing how many staff members and legislators that truly weren't aware cannabis patients lose their Second Amendment rights, that was, and being able to let them know is honestly groundbreaking, because it starts with knowledge. People can't do anything about what they don't know. You know, I do have to say, when I came home from that DC Project week experience, I don't think I've ever been more motivated in my life. You know, as you said, everybody has their own lane, and mine was I lose my Second Amendment rights for no other reason than a non-toxic, non-addictive, non-lethal medication that I take. Okay. Other women were there saying how the one place they didn't carry their firearm was on a college campus because it's a gun-free zone, and how they were sexually assaulted because of it, and they were unable to defend themselves. And then I listened to, you know, other women talk about how, you know, they had to fight for their right just to have a safe place, a safe gun range within city limits, you know, for people to practice, and, you know, and how they made that change. And then I listened to other women, how they had a stalker, and they were in a gun-free zone restaurant, the only place they didn't carry their firearm. And the stalker, who they reported and did everything right, came into that restaurant and shot this young woman's husband 6 times, killing him. And quite honestly, Cheryl, when I left there, I can't say that I felt more of a drive ever to get my Second Amendment rights back. I don't want to become a victim. These women have encouraged me. They've encouraged me to get my rights back, not just for myself, but for every other person in Delaware and, quite honestly, across the United States. Just because you choose a different medicinal option does not mean you should lose your right to protect yourself, quite frankly.
Absolutely.
And so I just learned, honestly, I learned so much, and I left there beyond inspired. I can't even tell you.
Wow, it was fantastic. And I don't know if you were inspired before, during, or after that, but I understand that we might be visiting your office there one day, or maybe at your state legislature. You're thinking about maybe running for office at some point. Is that so?
Well, you know, a few years ago, getting involved in, you know, getting bills passed and advocating, I've also learned quite a bit on what goes on at Legislative Hall. And I'm starting to think maybe I want to throw my hat in the ring, and I want to be part of the conversation, because this isn't just about me. This is about my children. This is about my grandchildren. This is about my community. This is about my state that I love. And who knows? Who knows? Maybe, definitely not this next election, but the one after 2022, who knows?
I love it.
It's something I'm definitely interested in. And you know, I would love to have more of a voice, and I would, quite honestly, love nothing more than to represent my district. So we'll see. It's just a matter of when, and we'll see what happens.
Well, and that's the thing, is that, you know, we have to have people who are in it for the right reason. We have to have public servants. And
Yes.
I know you, and I know that is how you would approach this. You would represent those who have voted you in as a representative, instead of being a politician, how so too many are.
You've broken up there for a minute.
Oh, okay.
The screen froze.
Am I back now?
Oh, you're back. You're back. But I think I see where you were going with that. And you're right. I would represent this district. This wouldn't be my district. I would be theirs. I would work for them, and I would advocate for them.
Absolutely.
And I would get their I would make their tax dollars worth it. I would work as hard as I possibly could for them. Honestly, and with integrity, and with strong values and morals, and absolutely. And I think we need more of that.
We do. We have too many politicians, and the difference for me between a public servant and a politician is, you know, who they're doing it for. A politician is very self-serving, right? They're trying to figure out how they can game the system for financial gain or popularity gain, you know, fame, those kinds of things. And that is absolutely not you. You are definitely, you are people driven, you are purpose driven. And I think that that would be an amazing thing for you to put your hat in the ring. Well, I've kept you for quite a while. I appreciate so much your time, your wisdom on this. Like I said, you've moved me from a place where I was like, I don't know about this whole marijuana thing. And I'm also, my husband and I have a gun store, so it's kind of baked into our brain that, oh, marijuana, bad, because if somebody opens the wallet and I see that little green card, the sale stops immediately. I am federally bound to stop the sale. It's hard for me because I now feel for the reason they have that card, but I can't, I can only encourage them to do what you've done. And that is be a voice, get out there, change the laws, I think one of the things Congressman Thomas Massey wants to do is take marijuana off of the schedule that it's on.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it's no longer seen as a narcotic in the same way. Is that correct? Did I say that right?
Well, if it's D or rescheduled, it puts it in a completely different classification, which would then not block right to bear arms, which that would then allow better research, allow better access. Yes, absolutely. That would be one solution.
That, or just take the question off the 4473, because why is it on there in the first place, really? I mean,
right, exactly.
Because it doesn't say all the other schedules or all the other narcotics. It just specifically targets that one. But so
That's
as we wrap up, Kim, I know you're not really a public person yet, but if people feel like you started a fire inside of them and they have more questions for you, or they want to reach out to you or follow the work you're doing or support you either in your state or in their home state, that kind of work you're doing, what would be the best way for them to find you and do those things?
Well, they can email me at kim.m.petters@gmail. Or quite honestly, a lot of people do find me on Facebook and send me a message, and you would be surprised how many people I've teamed up with, and we've moved mountains together that way. And so honestly, Reed, you can reach out to me either way, and I would be happy to help anybody. If anyone's listening to this and they want to get some legislation started in their state and they just have no clue how to do it, I would be happy to help them. I would walk them through the entire process, because the more states that get on board, the better message it is sent to, the stronger the message is sent to the federal government.
Fantastic. I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you so much for your service. While you were in the Air Force, and even now you are continuing to serve others. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your time. And we will definitely be checking back in and talking to you soon. Thank you so much, Kim Petters.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. All right, stick around. There's always lots more coming up on Gun Freedom Radio.